We live in a world ruled by tyranny, where knowledge is suppressed and ignorance is glorified. A world where propaganda and misinformation travel the airways at the speed of lies. But in the midst of the violence and chaos, a great awakening is taking place. And as the media empires continue to collapse, a new network is forming. A network of truth, a network of courage, a network of awareness. Peace and greetings. You are now tuned into the Network of Awareness podcast radio station, where we examine current events, politics, health, finance, and topics of cultural relevance in America and throughout the world, while bringing you insightful interviews with guests that will both educate and inspire you. And now, your host of the Network of Awareness podcast radio station, Aura the Informationalist.
Please just tell me what's happening to me in plain English without the mumbo jumbo.
My aura is a network full of awareness and gifts like Aura, the informationalist.
How you doing?
Peace and blessings and greetings and grand rising to all the brothers and sisters, to all the Network of Awareness, and to all the truth seekers around the world. You're now tuned in to a live broadcast of the Network of Awareness, and I'm your host, owner, and founder of the Network of Awareness, or the Informationalist. And today, I got a great show for a series called the Stages of Realizations. And this is the first installment of that series. And I'm going to have a very special guest come on in just a moment by the name of Demar Hampton, a brother in the Most High in Christ, a brother that is also a family man, a father, a husband, and a man that's trying to pursue righteousness and become a better version of himself than he was yesterday, today. And today we're going to work on doing that together. And today's episode, you're probably going to see it in the description box. And I'm going to take a intermission to put everything in the in the description box for those that are going to be listening to this live broadcast and watching it or listening to it on Spreaker. So we're live on Spreaker. We're live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. So just give me a moment and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what this series is about, and then we'll take a brief intermission and bring Demar Hampton onto the show, and we'll get it started right quickly. So with that being said, as I mentioned, this is called the Stages of Realizations, and this is going to be a thought-provoking series that explores various stages of realizations that human beings experience throughout their lives. Each episode is going to focus on a different stage of realizations, and such as realizations of mortality, realizations of one purpose, and the realization of the power of relationships. And through this interview and many others, expect to gain insight into how to navigate, or should I say, with guests and personal accounts and stories, the NOA is going to delve into psychological and emotional aspects of each stage of realization, so that you, the listener of the NOA podcast, can also expect for us to give the listeners and share these experiences of various stages of realization. And through these stories from knowledgeable people on how to best handle different realizations and how to best use them to grow as individuals. By discussing the various stages of realization, the NOA podcast encourages listeners to reflect on their own lives and make positive changes. All right. So I just gave you a brief summary of what this episode is all about. So I hope that brothers and sisters enjoy and get great edification and knowledge and great substance from this episode. So with that being said, let's take a brief intermission. I'm going to play a song while I get everything set up on Spreaker.com. All right. And let's play a song by the brother Demon Slayer. And this is called Stay Patient.
Yeah, we ready for war. Moving on one accord. Brethren at my side. We just gotta endure. Taking my thoughts and bringing to Christ. Throwing down imaginations. I'm just trying to stay patient. Stand fast, can't wait. Yeah, we ready for war. Moving on one accord. Brethren at my side. We just gotta endure. Dodging demons like the Matrix. I'm just trying to go home. Swore made it that truth. So I just gotta move on. Ready for war, ready for death if it go like that. So if I die, I pray that I die for the most I got. I can't turn around and can't look back, so it's all out war. I'm seeing the path so narrow, careful to not fall. Get up for it's too late. Sun come with a blaze with a judgment, and that day won't see where the sun went all black like sackcloth and the moon blood. This is a warning to go and repent. This is a warning to seek out the Lamb. This is the point where you go and examine. Gotta stay patient, I'm looking inside. Trust the Most High with all of my life. I love all my brothers, we suffer with Christ. When it feel like death, just know that it's life. Don't give up, Christ pay that price. Don't give up, Christ pay that price. Yeah, we ready for war. Moving on one accord. Brethren at my side. We just gotta endure. Taking my thoughts and bringing to Christ. Throwing down imaginations. I'm just trying to stay patient. Stand fast, can't wait. Yeah, we ready for war. Moving on one accord. Brethren at my side, we just gotta endure. Dodging demons like the Matrix. I'm just trying to go home. Swore made it that truth. So I just gotta move on.
You are now tuned in to the network of awareness.
All right. I'd like to welcome my guest, my special guest for today of the first installment of Stages of Realization, the brother Demar Hampton. Shalom, brother.
Hey, shalom, brother. How you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for coming on to the show. And I'm glad that you're here to discuss these stages of realization. And one of the reasons why I thought you'd be a great guest for this episode is because you can give a lot of different perspectives. You can give the perspective as just a individual man that is pursuing righteousness, that is studying to be approved to have a greater relationship with the Most High and with Christ. And through your faith and your beliefs, you can give that perspective of your stages of realization throughout your life, as well as the stages of realizations throughout your marriage, being a husband, and your personal growth collectively with your wife and as an individual man, growing and learning how to be a better man in marriage. And then last but not least, also being a family man and you have a lot of kids.
Yes, I do.
It's like you have like a little army. And I love your kids. I think your kids are awesome, as well as your wife, Danielle. And you can give that perspective of being a father, not only to boys, but to girls as well. So there's a lot of great things that you bring to the table as far as giving people an understanding of what that looks like from your perspective and your experiences. So let's get right into it. Um, let's start off with um, give a little background to who you are for the listeners, just so we can start off and start from the nucleus of it all.
All right. I was raised in a middle class home back when those used to exist. With both of my parents. There was a point in time when my parents did separate. So I was kind of put in a position to become a young man early. Um, I've been working all my life. We just had that discussion yesterday, since that was one of the things my father instilled in me from a young man, when I had a paper route, to working for my father's business, to, when my father passed, having to kind of find my path and make things work as a young man. So, nothing typical that a lot of our men of our people don't have to go through. We all have our challenges when we're young, but they kind of mold us. It was just me and my sister. Before my father passed, I had two twin brothers. Um, Grew up in Buffalo, New York, small town that's become a violent town as of recently. But during the time we were coming up, it was the type of place where you could be miles away from home, and the parents wouldn't worry, just as long as you made it home by the time those street lights came on. So a lot has changed since then. But that's kind of what I grew up in.
Well, let's talk about that. As far as like your parents divorcing and then you having to take on kind of those men of the house responsibilities, and as well as integrate the passing and the transition of losing your dad. You know, talk about that, because that's a realization, right? That was a stage in your life where you had to realize certain things that you had to do now and be responsible for. So can you let the listeners know about what that experience was like?
Yeah, when my father was not a man of wisdom of the scriptures, but there were certain things he was trying to instill in me as far as being a hardworking man. That's one thing he was. He had his faults, but he was a hardworking man, and that was something he tried to instill. We saw the hard work that he put forth and the benefits that it brought our family. So when he passed, I remember, I'm not a man that cries, but I remember crying myself to sleep at night, not having anyone to talk to, things like that, not having any men to counsel with or ask questions, as I dealt with relationship issues, not knowing how to deal with women at the young age, because I was kind of pushed out and had to learn through trial and error a lot of things. But, like we say, the things that happen make us who we are today. So I don't want these things to be mistaken for complaints. But they are things that did take place. I remember times when we were growing up, when I was left to kind of be the spearhead of the house. Times we didn't have our water on. We had to connect the hose to the people next door to get our water. So there were tough times. The electric man come turn the electric off. We pay somebody to turn the electric back on for us. you know and I would imagine some of us have been through those things, but it seemed those things were more than it wasn't. The tough times were more than it was easy times. And now that I look back on it, I understand that the Lord was dealing with us because we wasn't serving him. When I was young, I didn't understand what was going on. I just thought we were just catching the worst of luck. But now when we look back on it, now I know exactly what it was, that kind of molded us to bring us to where we are today. But when I was young, it kind of, when the separation took place between my mom and dad, being a young man and not knowing any better, it kind of made me bitter as well. So, and I didn't understand why. you know, because I didn't understand the dynamics between my father and my mom. You know, so I just know that they separated. It didn't work. We don't know for what reason, but you know, it did have an impact on me and my views as a young man and the way I looked at things.
Okay, so now you've gone through that, and now you're becoming an adult, right? Now, when did you really start examining the scriptures and taking that examination to apply to your life? Because that's really what's important, because knowledge is not knowledge until it's applied. You could read scriptures all day, but if you're not living it, it means nothing. And with that, can we go into the realization of what compelled you to want to pursue looking at scriptures to better your life and have a relationship with the Most High, having a relationship with Christ, and really developing yourself personally? When did that all happen? When did you realize that?
This, I'll tell you, when I would say maybe about 22, 23. My aunt, Lynn Hainsworth, who used to work in a women's prison in Bedford Hills, had used to come down with some tapes from brothers and sisters in New York City preaching, you know, the word of God. And at this time, I'm still trapped in the hood. I'm gambling. I'm smoking marijuana. I'm hanging out with the young, although we may not have been in the mischief, it was just no progress. We were just hanging out every day. You know, I had a job amongst my other friends. They weren't really working. And that soon came crashing down as well. But when she bought this information, at the time I was searching for something to try to get out the neighborhood because a lot of our people were dying. I was trying the Navy. I was trying anything just to get out the neighborhood. But when she bought the understanding of the word, it grasped me immediately. You know, and you know, I would watch the tapes and things like that. And when at first coming, I don't want to say it was more of a knowledge search, but the information was very interesting and compelling, which made me want more and more, although I was still doing, you know, the things that I was doing. The scriptures talk about wisdom walking with us in crooked ways, you know, so
Very true.
yeah, so I was still kind of in the streets, hanging out, smoking weed, things like that. And I remember one of those realization moments, if you will. Um, it was one Passover I attended, and you know what's funny is back then the understanding of Passover was, you know, no leavened bread and things like that. But something said to me spiritually, you know what? I'm not going to get high these 8 days, these 7, 8 days here. I'm not going to get high. I'm just going to stop smoking weed, which is the true understanding of Passover, removing that leaven from ourselves. And this is like my first attempt at the Passover ever, you know, and I had stopped. And before I say that, marijuana had a strong hold on me. You know, it was something I did every day. We woke up to do it. You know, we would put our money together to go do it. You know, it had that type of stronghold on me. But for that 8 days, I didn't. When I came to the realization, I'm actually sitting in a trap house around a bunch of murderers and gamblers and drug dealers, saying to myself, you know what? You know, they're trying to pass me the weed. I'm not going to get high these 8 days. And I didn't understand then, but I was, after that 8 days was over, I was able to overcome that stronghold where I didn't have the want to, you know, to want to smoke marijuana or get high anymore. So from that stage, it started going to, let me start watching who I'm hanging around because they're going to keep passing me blunts, to, you know what, let me read my Bible, you know, so it became a process of growth there. You know, as far as in looking at myself and, you know, the things I needed to do to change. And when I started making these changes, things started getting better in my life. I'm a young man. I can't really understand it, you know, what was going on. But I did notice that if I'm doing this, I'm getting different results. So that was probably one of those moments of realization, one of those first moments of realization in my life as far as the word of God is concerned.
Now I'm glad you brought up the whole thing about the trap house, because that's I was gonna ask you, like, was there a pivotal moment when you're in the hood that you're like, I gotta stop doing this? But
Mhm,
you had one particular stage of realization, which was, okay, if I'm gonna do this Passover and if I'm gonna purge this leaven out of me, let me just pick one thing. And you picked probably the most challenging thing at that particular time of your life.
mhm,
Because I used to be a big weed time smoker recreationally. Now, I truly believe that marijuana is great medicinally. It helps a lot of people, but when you're doing it recreationally, it creates a lot of idle time, and
I see.
that's where the malevolent forces and the principalities come in, like Satan.
Mhm,
Um, but you had that realization, and you it took you on a course to
mhm,
now start pursuing something different than what you knew before. So let's talk about that transition. Now you realize that weed doesn't have a stronghold on you no more.
mhm,
You're compelled in your spirit to seek out this really compelling information that's really inspiring and lighting a fire up your butt. So
mhm.
take us to the realizations now that the stage of now pursuing that and what that was like.
So, from that point of that pivotal point, the Lord began to put me around men, all right, who I could ask questions, who I could, because again, this was after a time that my father wasn't there, and men who were seeking the same thing that I was seeking. I was introduced to elders of the church at that time, and then put in front of me examples of men who may have been walking contrary in the punishments that will befalling them. And all of this I didn't put together at the time these things were happening. These are things I can now sit back and meditate on and say, okay, that's what the Lord was showing me. But my understanding was too young to kind of get it. So there grew a zeal in me and some other brothers, to start seeking out the word of the Lord, making our way down to the church, getting tapes, getting pamphlets and flyers, going over, just spending our whole day and all our conversation was in the word of the Lord. And there became a growth in all of that. And one thing I can say when I look back now is the information was there, the full application of it spiritually was not. All right. Because at the time, it was more of a knowledge quest, if you will. And again, me being able to see the benefits of being obedient, and I couldn't see that then. You understand fully. I just know that I was trying something new and I was getting different outcomes, but I didn't really know the power of the Most High at that time. So, we would show our zeal towards the Lord. And then it came to a time where we felt we were strong enough in the faith and learned enough in the faith to go out and preach to the people. You know, not knowing that before we did that, we had to make sure we were doing it ourselves. So that was that became later one of those moment of realizations because the scriptures talk about those different seeds that fall upon the earth. You have some that fall upon the wayside, you have some that fall on stony ground, some that fall among the thorns, some that fall on good ground. And I was
But
not a
every seed bearing plant is there to use.
right.
That's I used to use that Genesis 129 verse. I wrote a song about it to validate my marijuana use at the time. But no, go
um,
ahead, brother. Sorry to
no,
interrupt.
you're fine. At the time, when we look back now, I was not a seed that fell on good ground because when tribulation came, and we'll kind of go into that a little bit later, I would imagine. But when the challenges came and the things like that, I failed disastrously. Which caused a ripple effect throughout my life to actually where I am right now. So which goes later on into those moments of realization, if you will. But just the zeal that we had for the word of the Lord at the young age, being gathered to men who were like-minded, and then the purpose of feeling like it was our duty to go out and teach this information to our people, were some of those moments of growth and realization at that time.
That's great to know because there's many of us that never come to that realization where there's people that I know that are still doing the same thing they were doing in high school in their 40s
Hmm.
and still not realizing that they're doing it because they become so conditioned socially and mentally to being this way. And a lot of times there are things that the Most High is showing us. There's things that come into our life that are going to show us this needs to change, that needs to change. You keep repeating the same things over and over. That's insanity, right? And
Hmm.
you start to go a little crazy doing the same thing. And the Most High say, hey, if you want to stop being like this has to change. And sometimes people don't pay heed to the signs
Sure
and to the
don't.
messages that are being given, whether it be through people, whether it be through nature, whether it be through their dreams. It's so many ways that the Most High can influence you throughout this vast space that we call universe. That energy is like it's hitting you in a way specifically for you. That's why we all have great purpose, right? And some of us realize that potentiality of our purpose and we fulfill it and seek it out, and others let it drop to the wayside and become that average Joe. Because I think the average Joe is the one that doesn't have any faith, any purpose, or any realization of the light that's within them.
Mhm.
And you started going through that process of being like, oh, wait a second, there's something more meaningful to this thing called life
Right.
that I'm becoming aware of that I wasn't aware of before. You only had probably glimpses of it.
Right.
So let's talk about tribulation since you brought it up, because
Mhm.
I tribulation and suffering go hand in hand. Because I think that's the best teacher is the experience of tribulation and going through major hardships.
Mhm.
And this is something that I came to the realization of in my 30s is that a lot of our tribulation and hardship does not come from any other source. It doesn't come from the Most High, and it doesn't come from Satan. It comes from our decisions. It
Mhm.
comes from the freedom of our own will. So when we make bad choices, there are circumstances and consequences to that. One of my favorite quotes is from As a Man Thinketh, where it says, circumstances don't make the man, it reveals into himself. And your circumstances, like, I'm here right now. I'm in these tribulations because I put myself here. So I'm responsible for getting out. Just like that saying, God helps those who help themselves, you know? So when was that tribulation, or what was your first tribulation that you came into? Because, and the reason why I'm asking is because you started pursuing truth. You started to
Right.
transition to be a truth seeker. And you know better than I do that when you are living like that, things are going to come at you to test you. The Most High
Yep.
is going to be like, oh, you really about this life? Let's see. Let's see. And
Yep.
then boom, you get hit with a bunch of things to see if you're really about that life. So let's talk about those realizations or those stages that you went through.
The funny thing is, it's one of those things that all men
Right.
are going to be tried with at one point in time in their life, and that's the woman. So,
Or sometimes, many times, like me.
yeah, maybe. Well, this is the first one. All right, yeah.
I hear that.
There was when we were in the faith, there was a young woman that I met named Dazetta. And since then the we've understood the scriptures on how you want to try a person, and make sure they're of the faith, and you want to you know um, deal with people and make sure they have the love of the Most High first before we start engaging in marriage and things like that. But we didn't have that understanding then. It was just a young woman who seemed like she wanted to keep the commandments of the Most High, and she didn't want to wear pants. That's good enough for me. So we started dealing, and I can honestly say that I was not the man that I needed to be, at the time. And I'm sure that she was not the woman that she needed to be at the time. Which led to a very bitter relationship and a separation. And then all the things I had inherited from my mom and my dad, she ended up stealing from me. I mean, everything, my lamps, my stereo, my bed, my everything,
Was she on crack or something?
No, it was just, she that's the thing, this was not a woman that was in the Lord. It was all an act. But I didn't have the wisdom to be able to discern that because my flesh was just craving for a woman.
Right.
So I'm going to settle for less and make it work. So this was one of my first interactions with, because I had dealt with women before that, and had some, bad relationships. But this was the first time that in the Lord, or trying to keep the commandments of the Lord, doing the best to what I understood at that time, which was very little. I got to see it became really bitter and really went sideways with that young woman. And it's not to blame her, because I was the man.
Right.
So, like you say, my decisions put me in that situation. So that was one of those first really bad things, because that bitterness from dealing with that wore on me for quite some time. And I had a bitterness towards women overall, to the point where after that relationship, I remained celibate for about 3 to 4 years. Which for a man at my age at that time, knowing what we knew was a difficult thing to accomplish.
Yes.
So it took us,
like.
yeah.
Yeah,
But,
you got brothers starting to be like, "Yo, bro, you gay?" Like,
yeah,
what's going on here? You get all of that, right?
exactly. Exactly. So I did find that from that time, I began to grow more, and then eventually I was able to remove that bitterness from my heart and know that it was because of my decisions that I went through that, small tribulation, as some may see, it's a small thing, but, now I understand what the scriptures say. So now I know what it was. There was a lot of mistakes on my part, even allowing, my substance to be under the foot of the woman like that. It was a lot of mistakes on my part. Let's just leave it like that. To the point where, now when I look back and I was young to analyze myself and, say, yo, that was foolish of me to do that, but there were still tribulations to come, because, I'm growing in the word. I'm growing in the understanding. I'm showing my zeal to the Most High. And, we all know that, when you resist Satan, he will flee. But guess what? He's coming back.
Yeah, he's strategizing.
Oh, he's going to come back. And
Coming
he came
back with
back.
a whole different angle.
Oh, brother, he came back and he presented to me exactly what I liked, what I wanted, to the point now where now I'm dealing with this woman, and for whatever reason, I felt I had to hide it. You know what I mean? She was at the time what I believed a woman of another nation, but which was a no-no, but now we understand we can't tell who is who, but at the time we were with the understanding the Judas from America, Haitians, a Levi, Rubens, the American Indian. So we had that understanding that, everyone on that chart was Israel. And if you weren't on that chart, you were not Israel. So I don't know if this woman was of Israel or not now when I look at it. But back then, it was, to my understanding, she was a woman of another nation. But she had all the proportions that were exactly to my liking, and here comes another trial of the woman, and this trial I failed miserably, to the point where, I tried to hide these interactions with the woman, and brothers knew something was going on with me because I became distant, and that's when I look at, brothers and sisters, that may congregate with us. I know what that is when I see brothers and sisters that become distant. That means they're battling with something or they got something going on, you know, because that was one of the things, that was one of the first signs of me not doing right, was I became distant. And then it came to the point where she became pregnant and it was nothing I could hide, you know. So I had to man up and call the brothers and be like, yo, this is what's going on. You know, I've been dealing unjustly. You know, that still hurts my heart to this day. Um, you know, and then at the time it was so pleasing to the flesh, I was blind to what it was causing. You
Yeah.
know,
And that
uh,
happens so easy.
mhm,
The transition of that happening, it's so swift.
mhm. So I would say it became a setback, because a huge setback, because at the time these things were taking place, you know, I began to move further and further away from the Lord. You know, the things that I saw serious, you know, we're gonna keep the high holy days, we're gonna keep the Sabbath day, you know, easy things I tried to continue doing, but there were other things I was letting go, you know, one at a time, all for the pleasing of the woman. You know, so you know, now when I look at it, I see men, you know, the woman has wounded many. You know, we look at Adam, we look at, you know, David, I mean Solomon, you know, the wisest man of Israel, wounded by the woman, you know.
That's
David,
right.
David, a man after the Lord's own heart, you know, wounded after woman. What about
I think Solomon is the best example because
mhm,
he was seeking knowledge, right? And he got that. And he got a lot of other things. And it
yeah,
just goes to show you that knowledge is not knowledge unless it's applied.
right,
And Solomon wasn't applying knowledge when he was in his lust.
right.
He wasn't. He was even probably getting counsel from other brothers, like, yo, you slipping. You are slipping. These women, they're no good. And a lot of times we hide.
Mhm,
We, I was telling a young brother in the BOCC that I noticed that when we were having councils or discussions about a particular woman or whatever, there was very limited information that was being provided. Because he knew that if all was provided, that the
right,
level of counsel was going to be even more intense than it was with the limited amount of information. And we
right,
tend to do that. We tend to do that out of shame, or we just tend to do that because we are battling that lust, that desire, and we don't want to divulge because we want to hold on to that. So
right.
we covet it and we keep it secret
Hmm.
until it blows up in our face. And then
Yep,
we got to be completely honest, not just with ourselves and the Most High, but with the people that are trying to help us. And that's
right.
what happened, by the way.
Oh, and the Most High will blow it up in your face.
Big
Believe
time.
that. All right. The works of the flesh are manifest. You know,
That's
so he
true.
gives us instructions to abide by, and you know, those things are for our good. But when we go contrary, they have adverse effects. And what you cannot hide is the adverse effects when you're going contrary. You know, so that was one of those another one of those moments of, it took me a while to get out of that, because I ended up having 3 children um, with the woman. And, you know, even through that, I was very, once the relationship over, now it was her fault when I'm the one that chose that,
That's right.
you know? So, you know, and all of these are stages of growth, you know, to now I'm not bitter anymore. Now I know it wasn't her fault, but still, you know, dealing in that way, you know, I lost 20 years of
Right.
growth in the Most High that I could have been doing. And you know, all praises to the Most High, the mercy that He has been showing me throughout my life, because there were many times that I could have lost my life. There were many, you know, the scriptures talk about that son that took the father's inheritance and went to go live riotously with it, you know, until he's in the swine's den eating with the pigs, you know, where even the servants of his father have enough. And he's like, I'm the son of my father. How do I not, you know, I hit rock bottom more than once, you know, through that dealing with that woman. And that was because my own stubbornness and pride. Now I know what it is, but I was kicking against the bricks, you know, as the scriptures say. But also, you know, even though since then I have, you know, returned and repented from those things to not do them anymore, the consequences of those actions are still rippling through my life to this day. You know, to this day, to right now where I'm sitting here right now. You know, where
Right.
you know, there's a lot of things behind the scenes that go on with the children I had with the woman, you know, and things like that. The lessons they were being taught at a young age against their father and stuff like that. So just from that single mistake, just from that single bad decision, you know, which it felt good to the flesh, you know, but when I turned around and looked at the things I was leaving behind me, my life was a car wreck. You know, so that was a very, very pivotal point in my life, that kind of brought me to where I am now. Because, like I said, I carried a lot of things on my heart with that, and it took me a long time to get out of that divot or out of that rut. You know, and well, maybe we'll talk later on how the Mosai was able to, you know, get me out of that. But like I said, I was stubborn, proud, chasing my own lusts, and I hit rock bottom more than once. And it was a sad thing to see, I would imagine, for those who were watching.
Yeah, I remember reading in the Apocryphal Wisdom of Solomon talking about that, of having children outside of marriage, and just having children outside of marriage will, I'm not going to say bring about curses, but to a certain degree bring about a curse in the way that child grows up, because
Yeah.
I've experienced it myself with my own daughter, and having a child with a woman that I knew literally for 1 month, I think, probably even less than that.
Okay.
All right. And that woman wanted to abort, but wanted me to make the decision. Said, I'll abort if you want me to, if not. And I said no. But that took on its course to where it's at now, to where there's still tribulation there.
Mhm.
And I think that all of us have that. I don't think that there's not one man on this planet or woman that doesn't have some type of tribulation from their past that they still have to face and deal with and overcome, because
Right.
it's stages of the overcoming the adversity that it brings. And
Yeah.
that's the spiritual warfare, in my opinion,
Yes,
is that
sir.
it never ends. And I believe that it never ends. Like, we're not going to ever be perfect. We could pursue perfection, but that perfection is not realized. I think that the realization of it all from what we do here comes when we leave the body. And
Mhm.
what I mean by leave the body, meaning that 22 grams of energy called the spirit or soul
Right.
ascends or descends or whatever it does. Then we're gonna know what it is and what it isn't, right?
Mhm.
So now that you had that experience and you learned a lot from it,
Mhm.
what was the understanding that you came to once that was all over, that you had to now pursue and be like, all right, I made these mistakes. What's the next stage of realization? Like, where did you move on from there?
Well, from there, you know, I ended up meeting a young woman who is my wife now, Danielle, about 16, 17 years ago, you know, and you know, even at that time, I still wasn't who I needed to be. And like I say, I hit a lot of rock bottoms, you know, but she stuck by me through those rock bottoms. And you know, you know, we were having our trial and errors, you know, our issues in our relationship, as all relationships will have if they're not in the Lord. You know,
By the way, shout outs to the sister Danielle,
right.
Damar's wife.
How you doing? How you
They yeah, she stuck by me, you know, through all of those things, because she saw something in me, you know, that was different than, I guess, what she had been um, opened up to up until that point, you know. So, you know, I still kind of had a toe on the ground as far as in acknowledging that there is a God and that there is a way that we ought to conduct ourselves. But, remember we talked about how if you resist Satan, he will flee, but he will return. And now at this, during these times, this is when that spirit of weed comes back now. So now I'm dealing with the demon of marijuana, the demon, and dealing with that. Now that brings a bunch of other demons, in the house. Me and the wife having arguing acts, me not being loyal, to the woman, engaging in relationships outside of her and things like that. When I knew better, these are all things I knew better. And, the scriptures talk about how they that walk in darkness know not at what they stumble. And, I was walking in darkness, and like I say, I was catching the worst of what some people call today luck. I was catching the worst of luck. Nothing seemed to go my way. It was like every time I stepped and did something that the Most High did not want me to do, I was getting dealt with immediately. Immediately, to the point where, and at this time I didn't have anyone but my wife. I didn't have my family. I didn't have brothers and sisters in the church. I didn't have any men, to counsel with a thing. I became the counselor with the little bit of information I knew. I became the counselor for everyone I knew. Where here it is, I'm struggling to do right myself. But that just puts in perspective how much work we need as a people. Because here I am, I know I need tons and tons of work. I'm dealing with lasciviousness. I'm dealing with, drug usage and things like that. But I have people coming to me for counsel because of the little bit, less than a thimbleful of information I've been open to, as far as the Most High is concerned. Our people were lacking even that. So I found that was one of the things I look back on, and I found that to be interesting. But, me and my wife, we were dealing, and because I'm not focused on the Lord and my thoughts and my mind was cloudy, there's a lot of things that were going on in my house, that, were not according to the Lord's commandments. So like I say, every time we went wrong, we were getting judged, every single time, so and because my wife was with me, guess what? She was bearing the blunt of those judgments as well. You read the story of Achan, where he took the Babylonian garment and the wedge of gold and hid it in the dirt in his tent. When the Lord judged him, what happened? He judged his whole family. So in a sense, because I wasn't on my game, and my thoughts were cloudy, my mind wasn't focused, my focus wasn't on serving the Lord, I wasn't guiding my house according to the understanding of the Most High. All intents and purposes, I was leading my family to hell. And we're watching just my household descend, to a point where even we hit rock bottom as a household where we were homeless. Here is it, I'm a working man every day and we're homeless. And it all happened so strange to where a house we stayed in for years, the man just said, hey, you got to go. You got to go. This is your last month. Nothing that we did. Now we know it was the Most High. It wasn't anything that we did. We weren't bad tenants. We paid our rent. We weren't tearing up the property or anything like that, but he just up and said, you got to go. And now we're scrambling for a place to stay, and we're homeless. We're staying in a Salvation Army, with, people using the bathroom on themselves, and, and even between that, I had my stints of being a homeless young man, staying with homeless men who don't care about life, so much that they don't even wash their bodies, so, that's when you hit rock bottom, when you're put in situations like that, because those are some of the things that the Lord provide us with when we're obedient, that food, that clothing, that shelter. Those are the necessities of life. And we were missing all of those. There were days we didn't know where our meals were going to come from. There's, we're getting hand-me-down clothes and things like that. And this is from a man that's working every day, but the scriptures talk about those holes in our purses because of our disobedience. So for whatever reason, you know, I'm continuing to kick against the pricks and continuing to kick against the pricks. And this, like I said, this went on for 20 years, where I'm so stuck in my pride, I don't see what the Lord is trying to show me, to the point where, and through this 20 years, I hadn't seen my mom, hadn't seen my aunt. I may have talked to my sister here and there, so I was kind of out there just by myself, and then there was one interaction I had with my mom and some brothers and sisters, and the conversation was full of grace, and let me know that, listen, as long as we alive, you have a chance to return to the Lord. And a spark just kind of lit up in me, to where after that conversation, that was my last time smoking weed. Here I am, I done smoked for 17 years or so like that, and after that conversation, me and my wife went home and said, yo, we need to change our life today. And a spark just hit us, and from there it's been up. It's been progress from there. And that was another one of those moments of realization to show me, man, all them years I could have been progressing in the Lord, and maybe my story is for some, as a story of precaution, or as a cautionary tale, if you will, but I know that I look at, throughout all of those times, there were a lot of pivotal points. And that was another one, that conversation of grace, that the brothers and sisters brought to me to say, hey, return to the Lord. He will have you. You're alive. You're breathing. Return to the Lord. And from that day, it's been all uphill. And that's all praises to the Most High through Christ.
Yeah, all praises for that, because, even, in the short time that I've known um the people and the body from the BOCC, I've gotten to know certain people more than others, but there's others that I've gotten to know a little bit, but that little bit that I've gotten to know has been very impactful. And one of those people is your mom.
Yeah.
Because and I'm just going to tell you a quick story that you may or may not know. Maybe some people may know. I know some people know about it. But somebody was sowing discord against me almost immediately when I showed up.
Mhm. Wow.
Somebody that I was trying to help, and it was a woman.
Hmm.
And that woman came to your mother to sow discord in me towards me, and your mom nipped that in the bud and was like, "Oh, you need to go talk to him, and this needs to be handled the right way." Because if she would have went the other route, that situation would have went
Hmm.
left real quick, right? But it didn't, because she was a righteous woman paying heed to the word that filled her up, and she was living it. She just
Hmm.
wasn't she was applying. She
Hmm.
was applying the scriptures. So I just wanted to mention that to you. I don't know if you knew that, but that's why I have so much respect and love for your mom, and I admire her so much, even though I haven't really spent a lot of time with her. But just that alone, that one thing was like kind of like a guardian angel, because that's how I perceived it, because I'm like, you know what? If the sister didn't do that, that situation would have really went bad, and those
Right.
lies would have persisted about me, and then other people would have gravitated to it, and it just would have been an ugly situation, and I probably wouldn't be here right now. And when I
Right.
mean here, I mean being with y'all brothers and sisters and
Right.
fellowshipping.
All
Now,
praises.
with that being said, you just went through a major stage of realization, right? Through the
Hmm.
grace of the Most High and the people that are being placed in your life to give you counsel with grace.
Hmm.
Now that you've come to that realization, can you describe that what that stage did for your marriage and how it evolved into a better light, in a better condition?
Yes. What that did for our marriage was we had a lot of bad days. All right. We had a lot of bad days, but you know, there was times I couldn't tell Danielle to do anything. There was always an argument, always some back and forth, always, this and that. But I think the more she saw me subject myself to the Most High and me humble myself, that's that example, is something that, what, this man's just not telling me anything. This man is telling me, thus saith the Lord. This man's not trying to order his house according to his emotions. He's trying to order his house under the Lord. That is gravitating in itself. I know as men, we tend to beat on our chest to say, I'm the man, you got to listen to me. But as much humility as we show to the Most High in his words is the amount of humility that will be shown to you. So there's a scripture in I believe Ecclesiasticus 10 where it talks about we gain our authority through humility. All right, you don't gain your authority with roughness, or by being a lion in your household. And even that is still a process of growth. Where sometimes, if I'm continuing to grow, there may be times where people in the family have to kind of catch up. They may not be where I'm at right now, so I have to show kind of levels of patience, and things like that. And there's still battles with the flesh. Battles of patience and things like that. But, that's to bring us to perfection, the perfection in Christ, so I can honestly look back on where we were as a relationship, and to where we are now and say there has been a whole heap of progress, but I'm humble enough to know that we got a whole lot more progress to go.
And one thing I want to say to you is I want to thank you for being so transparent and humbling yourself to admit to your mistakes, because that in itself is very important that a lot of people don't do, men and women, especially publicly.
Right.
Because if you could do it publicly, you've really humbled yourself, because you're not really caring about what other people think about you. It's you
Right.
caring about yourself and how the Most High sees you as the spiritual being having that experience physically.
Correct.
And I want to thank you for that, because not a lot of people can do that. There's certain people that shame, they don't want to share it. They don't want to share their mistakes. People don't want to admit they're wrong. And that's where pride comes from. Pride is like, I'm right. Even when I'm wrong, I'm still right. So let's talk about now a stage of realization that you went through with your children in this current marriage, right? Because I know that when you have a child, I only have one, and one was a lot to deal with as a single parent, especially when I got full custody. So I can't imagine what life is like when you got 3, 4, 5 kids. So can you talk about some stages of realization that you went through with your children? Because one in particular for me was the actual birth of my child. And one thing I always tell brothers and sisters that haven't had kids, that are looking to have children, is that when they ask me, well, how is it when your child is born? I'm like, you can't explain it. It's ineffable. It's ineffable. It's one of those things that cannot be explained and cannot, you can't explain it to somebody, because they have to experience it for themselves. Okay. So can you go into that?
Well, I'll start by saying the birth of a child is probably the most amazing thing I've witnessed in my life. I have I've been there when men have passed away. And it's kind of scary, but I've also been there for every birth of all of my children. And that is the most amazing thing that a man's eyes will see. And, when you see things like that, there's a God. You have to know there's a God when you see something as beautiful as the birth of a child. Um, and it brings about a
And brother, by the way, I'm gonna step away, but continue. All
it
right, I'm gonna
brings
be off
about,
camera for a second.
yeah, a little bit of focus, if you will. You know what, I got to get this done, because I got these children that I need to watch over, and take care of. Now, at the time when I started having children, I didn't understand the full scope of responsibility, behind having these children, being able to intake the wisdom of the Lord so I can teach them and protect them. Because some people think as a man, protection is just physical protection, but we as men provide a spiritual umbrella as well for our family, or a hedge, as the scriptures call it, for our families and for our children. And that when I first started having children, I didn't understand that. I thought it was all about the finances, and I thought it was all about being present. So I had some battles with, being able to see my first set of children when I was young, them being taken from me, and skipping out of town and going through court and all of those things. And that was actually to a detriment to my children, to now dealing with Danielle and always being around my children. There's a difference. I often relate it to, children being like a plant, and the father being like the sun and the mother being like the water. You can't raise a plant just off of sun. You're going to scorch the plant, and you can't raise it off of water because it won't grow. So you need both in order for the plant to come to its fullness. And the Lord didn't make a mistake at the beginning when he made them male and female, and told them be fruitful and multiply, and that they should come together and be one. So anytime we try to do it outside of that, it's unfortunate. That's kind of that's the norm now, which is crazy. It's the norm. It's so normal, now that it's often overlooked of how much a detriment it is. So that was,
by the way, great metaphor and analogy to a mother and father to a child, the water and the light.
for sure. That came through one of those moments of realization, so
let's drop a bomb. Let's drop a bomb for that, for the brother, because that is a great metaphor. So if you didn't hear, I want you to hear it again. He said the father is like the sun for the plant being the child, and the mother is like the water, giving that child, nurturing that child, and the father giving that light, that guidance to help them grow, and the woman, the mother, giving that substance of nurturing and of guidance as well, being the water and helping it grow and be strong. So great analogy. I'm kind of stuck on that right now because it's so true. And when one is lacking, the plant is not going to grow properly, and it might not even grow. It might actually die, right? So now that I talked about when you have your child and anything about when you have your child, that it's an experience you can't explain, and you can see the Most High in that. When you have that experience, it is clear as day. There's no refuting it. Is there any stages that you've gone through? Because I know that raising a girl is much different than raising a boy. So is there any stages that you can speak about for the listeners to gain some knowledge in, as far as like stages of realization raising a daughter and the stages of realization raising a son?
Yep. Well, first, let me say this, that parenting is always a work in progress. All right. Parenting is we have the scriptures that guide us, and the more we apply those things, the better we become at it. So parenting is always a work in progress. Dealing with the boys, you have to keep the boys busy. They require a hand over them to a stern hand to kind of deal with them in discipline. And I don't want to say a little bit more than the girls because discipline is needed for both of them. But for the boys, what I'm finding out is you got to keep them busy because there's a lot of distractions and things, that are out there, that tend to grab their attention. With the boys, well, I can't say with the boys all, but for children, music, the things that they intake. One of the things we always talk about is your information intake. What are you intaking? But you don't want to shield them from everything because you want them to be able to have the ability to discern at the same time. So there's a balance. What are you doing with your time? When you have your time, what information are you intaking? Versus, because one of the things I try to do is make sure I'm teaching the children constantly. There's always a lesson to learn every day, all day long. So with the young men, I deal with them in that. They require a look over the shoulder, and I don't want to say you kind of leave them to themselves a little bit more than the girls. And I hate to use the term leave them to themselves, but there's some things that they have to kind of figure out where they may bump their head and things like that, but you don't baby them. Get up,
Right.
Let's try it again. All right. So, whereas the girls are a little different, the concepts are the same. You're dealing with your information intake, who you're hanging around, what are you doing with your free time, but the girls require a little more focus and, the things I keep them busy with, different than the things I keep the boys busy with. You still want to give that leeway for them to learn, and, sometimes fall down and make mistakes, but, it's not like you've fallen, get up, you a man, it's kind of like you may have to nurture the girls up a little, and, whereas I may have to be a little bit stern to the boys, I can talk to the girls in a different fashion and get the same results, and then the scriptures give us expectations for the young men and expectations for the young women, and those are the things I try wholeheartedly first to hold me and my wife to, and then, hold the children to. And one of the things one of those moments of realization, if you will, is the faults I see in my children. 10 times out of 10, some faults that I have in myself that I have to deal with,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
because when you see yourself in your children and you're like, damn, I see something I don't like in my child, but it's something that she or he got from me. And
yep.
then you're like, oh, I see how that can make somebody else feel when it comes from me.
Right. And that's where judge not least ye be judged starts for me, at least in
Right.
my household. Now, I know I still have to deal with issues and things that may come up and deal with them according to the scriptures. But I also have to, when I'm done, now I have to do what? Examine myself to say, am I leaving that example in the house, for the children? And, sometimes we have to, we got to pray. Maybe we don't see it. And maybe we got to pray to the Most High that He, make it open and put it on Broad Street for us to see,
Right.
so we can make that change. But,
Mhm.
there is a difference in dealing with the boys and the girls, and then I try to spend a lot of time as a unit as well, because I have a lot of children. I know that children require their individual mom and dad time, which is difficult when you're working, kids are in school, it's time for Bible study, it's time for, so it's difficult to have that individual time, but we spend a lot of time as a unit together. So if you see me, it's a good chance I'm going to be with some of my children this weekend, maybe the girls, This week it may be the boys, but we always find ourselves together somehow.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing how the stages of realization lead to the individual going through the process of self-examination. And the brothers and sisters know that follow this show and the Council on Christ Relations that Brother Bon and I have the process of self-examination series that we do. And you can kind of correlate both because one has to happen before the other can happen. You have to realize what it is that you're doing and then examine it so that you can change it. And that is also part of the process of repentance. That all ties into it as well. Um, let's talk about, because we have about 20 minutes left, right? Because I told you we're going to do 90 minutes and I want to stick to that. Let's talk about, there's a couple things I want you to bring out, right? So I'm going to hit you with all of it at the same time.
Okay.
Gratitude is a universal powerful force that the Most High honors in great magnitude that I can't even put into words. When you are in that attitude of gratitude, right? That's the slogan, an attitude of gratitude. When you're constantly in an attitude of gratitude, you're gonna draw a lot of righteousness into your life. You're gonna bring a lot of righteousness in because you're grateful for what the Most High has given. You're also grateful for what the example of what the Messiah gave. And when you start appreciating that and being grateful for it, it opens up doors that are going to lead to nothing but positive things. So let's talk about those three aspects in regards to your family. I want you to talk about when was there that moment of realization where you were truly grateful to be a father. I also want you to discuss that same experience, but with your wife, being grateful to have your wife in your life. And then also, I want you to end this broadcast so that we can come full circle as about what you are grateful being a man of faith in the Most High in Christ and what that gratitude has done for you. And I would like to start in the order of your children, your wife, and then you.
All right. So I do have gratitude for my children because number one, it keeps me from being idle. This is most important. It keeps me busy. It keeps me growing because in my opportunities to sit down and teach them is when I learn. That's actually when I learn the most.
Right. And
You
our
know,
children have a way of teaching us too.
yes, yes, yes. And teaching them is when I'm learning as well. I don't know if they know that, and I'm grateful for that, because through them I'm growing still. I'm grateful for the unconditional love that they have for their father, and there's a reason that the Most High refers his love to us as a father and a child. You understand? And unless you're a parent, when you read those things, they may kind of go over your head. But now I get it. The children are teaching me to, be more patient, to be more long suffering. Because they're gonna make mistakes. They're children. They don't know. They've only been on the earth a certain amount of years. Whereas I may double or quadruple that. You know, that requires me to be extremely patient. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the help they provide me around the house when we speak about physical things, and just grateful for them, kind of giving me a reason to push forward every day. I know in different beliefs and things, they have a word for it, but they are my reason. Every day I wake up, every day I'm working, just to provide for my family, to be a guide and a light for my family, for my children. My wife, I'm very thankful for my wife because she's seen me go through many stages and she's stuck by my side. Many stages as a man, from an immature little boy who can't control his lusts, to growing into the man of the Lord that I choose to be. and the examples of Christ and the testimonies we see in the scriptures.
What is the, if you could pinpoint, I know there's a lot of things you're grateful for in regards to your wife, but if there's one that we can kind of bring out being one of the most important things for you that you've been grateful for, what would that one thing be?
That her sticking by my side.
Okay. Through
That's
all the trials and tribulations.
through everything we've been through, her sticking through my side. You know, even when I wasn't a good head of my household, she stuck by me. You know, and she's there, and now she's, you know, I dare say, able to reap the benefits, you know, to where we are now. But that's it, you know, because there's many situations where we could have parted ways and said, "You're not ready. Enough is enough. You know, I'm out of here." And now I'm in the same situation again, trying to raise some more kids without the sun and the light. You know what I mean? I mean, the water and the light, you know, so now I'm right back to square one, you know, so, you know, that's the grace of the Most High, I know. But her sticking by me is definitely, you know, that thing that I am definitely grateful for.
And there goes one of the kids right there.
Yeah, that's my little man Uriah. And then overall,
yeah, and then, you know, with you, what are you grateful for now? Becoming the man that you are present day, what are you most grateful to the Most High for?
well, let's start with being here.
Yeah.
Let's start with being
we did
here.
say we were going to discuss stages of realization about mortality. So yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's start with being here, you know, because, you know, I don't know if any know, but, you know, I've been having some health issues due to choices I've made in my life. You know, we talked about the smoking, you know, issues with my diet for a few years and things, and not showing discipline in that, you know, where I was probably a few steps away from a heart attack, you know. And my wife said, "Boy, you're going to take your butt to the doctor." Whereas I didn't feel a need to go to the doctor. I'm a man, I could push through it, you know, and come to find out I had an artery that was clogged in my heart where I could have been laying on the floor having a heart attack, you know, or at behind the wheel having a heart attack, you know, and not be here to be there for my kids, to be there for my wife, you know, to show them the gratitude, you know, of the things that they give to me. And, you know, I have to coach that to myself every day, because Satan will come in and try to make you frustrated. Satan will come in and try to make you impatient. You know, hey, I've repeated this 1,000 times. Why are you guys not getting it? Well, the Lord's repeated things to you 1,000 times as well, and it still remain by your side. So that's the example I have, and that I have to pass down to, you know, those that are under me. But the most important thing I'm grateful for is being here. You know, because no one's gonna be. The Lord put me in this situation for a reason, and, you know, if it's His will, I don't know if anyone could do it like I do it with my family. You know, other brothers and sisters may be able to, you know, and I receive help from the congregation and other brothers and sisters with their input and different outlooks on things. And you know what I mean? That I'll take all of that information in and apply it. But being here is the thing that I'm most grateful for, because we can't praise the Lord in the grave.
Very true. Very true. Um, so now that you're here, what have you realized based on just some recent experience? Because you and I had a discussion about this yesterday offline about discipline and doing certain things because it is a matter of life and death.
Yes.
And now that you've gone through this realization, like, yo, I got to change my ways with my diet, with what I put in my body, with how I use my body and what I do with it, so that I can be around here for my wife and for my children. Because if you leaving behind your wife and kids, and they're going to suffer from the loss of you being here based on your decisions. So now that you've come to the realization of that, what type of outlook do you currently have moving forward that you've realized?
Well, like you made mention of that word discipline. It's, we show discipline in, committing fornication, dealing in the love and things that, and the way we treat one another, how we treat our wives, our brethren, our children. We show discipline in all those things, but the discipline of our diet is all often overlooked. And if it wasn't important, the Lord would not have a dietary law. The
Right.
Lord would, right?
I don't think
Lord,
that the Most High intended for us to be on pharmaceuticals and to be
right,
sick, because the
right.
scriptures talks about being a just weight. It didn't say be this weight or that weight. It said a just weight, and a just weight is a healthy weight.
Well,
And
let's look at Moses. Moses was an old man, and when the Lord took him away, his eyes wasn't dim. He wasn't sick. He was in his full strength as an old man, leading the people of Israel through the wilderness. That didn't come from, being unsatiable when it's time to eat, being a glutton, and partaking of too much. The scriptures talk about little is sufficient for a man well nurtured. So these are some things that have been told to me, and maybe I wasn't listening when the Most High was talking to me through different brothers and sisters. So sometimes the Most High got to show you, hey, talking to you, you need to listen. So, these things have shown me that I need to take my diet a whole lot more seriously, than I have. Because what the old saying is, and it's not a scripture, but it says you are what you eat. And even though it's
very
not a
true.
scripture, that's so true. You are what you eat. So if you're eating a bunch of garbage and you can't show discipline in something as simple as your diet, there's a brother Kanai that came to me about a year and a half ago who had heart issues before, and he was telling me, yo, brother, this was when I just picked up a little weight. And he's like, yo, brother, I see you going down the wrong road. You may want to put a nip on that, and for a few days or so, I'm like, yeah. And then my discipline for that began to fade away. So that is a very important thing, that I don't feel I'm in a position to teach right now, because I'm in the process of doing it, so, and I feel like doing it will be a better example, so I don't want to be a hypocrite. But what I can say is the Lord shows us situations in the scriptures through testimonies where diet is important. His brother's fasting,
Big time.
which is important. There's you look at Judith, where she fasted every day except for the day before the Sabbath and the Sabbath day. Or you look at Daniel, who ate beans for 3 years, So there's examples of discipline in our diet in the scriptures. And then with the near death health issues that I just experienced, shows me, the love I have for my children, my wife, and my family. If I want to be here and intend to be here, that's something I have to take very seriously.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for coming on to the show. And before you go, any any final words to conclude this episode on the series of Stages of Realizations?
Final words is, you made mention of something at the beginning of the class today, or the talk today, and it's something I often teach my children, is that life has street signs. Yield, stop, go. Life has street signs in it, but you have to have your spirit able to discern those street signs, so I just ask everybody to, pick up the word of God, because there are instructions there for how we are to live our life, so you can be a better example for your children, your family, your wives, your husbands, because that is our duty. That is our reasonable service, as the scriptures say, and hopefully the things that I've been through can not only be a cautionary tale for, young brothers in our congregation, who may not be married yet or who are married, but for those who are not in our congregation, that there is a God in heaven, and there are instructions for us to live our life and conduct ourselves. And if we fall out of bounds with those instructions, there are consequences.
Very well said, brother. I want to thank you for coming on to the show. I think you did a phenomenal presentation on this first installment of the Stages of Realization series. So, once again, thank you for being so transparent and humbling yourself with just pure honesty about your trials and tribulations and your stages of realization in your life. And let's give them an amp clap for this one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, brother. So please stick by in the studio. I'm gonna just take you off camera for a little bit while I end this show, and I'll get back with you in just a moment. So the brother Demar Hampton, man of the Most High, family man, going through his stages of realization like we all are. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experiences. And I'll be right back with you, brother. So there you have it, the first installment of the Stages of Realization here on the Network of Awareness. And in conclusion, brothers and sisters, let's get the awakening beat going on here. Thank you for tuning into this live broadcast. For those that have stuck around, I want to thank you, and I hope that this episode gave you great substance on the first installment. Remember, this is the first one of the Stages of Realizations, and I hope that you can get great substance from this episode as you go through your stages of realization and going into your process of self-examination, so that you can be a better version today than you was yesterday, and to the pursuit of righteousness today and tomorrow and beyond. So with that being said, brothers and sisters, we're truly grateful for the support, and we are working diligently to provide our listeners with valuable information that can assist in developing a greater sense of awareness in our ever-changing societies, cultures, and world. And if you'd like to donate, support our show, please choose one of the links within the description box of either our Cash App, our PayPal account for the podcast, as well as subscribe to networkofawareness.com. You can also subscribe to our live broadcast on Spreaker.com, as well as any place where podcasts are played. And of course, we do some live broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Even though we're really not too fond of those platforms here, we still utilize them. So with that being said, I want to say peace, love, light, and blessings to you all the Network of Awareness, Awarians, and to all the people around the world. All right. And may the force of the Most High be with you. So let's go out with our outro from Sister Lydia. Let's go.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Network of Awareness. If you would like to join or find out more about our show, please subscribe and follow us at networkofawareness.com or your favorite podcast listening platforms. If you would like for us to discuss any specific topic you would like to listen to, leave us a message on our website, or you can directly email us at orra@networkofawareness.com. Now, tune in to one of the fastest growing podcast shows on social, spiritual, and self-awareness. With that being said, people, living in the present, being directed by what's given in the hour-long sessions, mind-blowing confessions of improvement that needs checking. Welcome it all is. Tuning out. Peace and blessings.